Chairman, thank you. Gene, it's good to see you again. Let me start with the same question we talk about every year. And we start, yeah, you'll know the rest of this question when I start it. Taxpayers' right to know, what we've talked about year after year. It's obviously passed. $20 million was given to OMB to go through the implementation. They've received that funding. They've said they're doing pilot programs. They've also said they're coordinating with you on the process. Tell me how it's going for taxpayers' right to know. They have the funding. They have the law. What's actually happening?
Yeah. Their current plan right now is to create an interagency working group to leverage additional resources needed and to get buy-in from the agencies because they're going to have to do that. And they're going to deploy resources this summer and make a major push to try to begin developing an inventory and having the pilot. So I'm encouraged by that. It's taken them a while to get to this point, so it may put them at a disadvantage in meeting the 2025 date that's been established.
Go ahead and try anyway. Is your team at the table in the conconversations on setting the list, setting the priorities, setting the program? Because the program definitions is a big part of this, and we've got to get that right at the beginning.
Yeah. We've been playing an appropriate role in protecting our independence, but for being a sounding board and making suggestions to them. So they're listening, and they're adopting some of our suggestions. We were the ones that were kind of encouraged them to bring the agencies in, not only from resources, but to get buy-in.
Get the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Strategic human capital management's been on your list since 2001. It remains on the list. This is an issue that I talk about a lot. Our committee's talked about a lot. The best I can tell, there's about 105 hiring authorities. When I asked the Chicos about it, about 20 of them are used more than 90% of the time. But every time I bring up direct hiring authority, everyone has a conniption on it and thinks that that'll never work or whatever it may be, except for the entities that actually use it. What is it going to take on the strategic human capital in trying to be able to figure out on the hiring side, just the hiring portion of it, to be able to simplify this so it's actually usable and it doesn't take 145 days to hire someone at the IRS?
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the government-wide shortages and critical skill gaps is in the human resource people who actually support and run the hiring efforts and activities. And there's problems at OPM itself and Office of Personnel Management, and there's problems in individual agencies. And so a lot of the human resource people who are trained over the years, going back to the civil service reform days, to be compliance-oriented, to make sure you don't do anything wrong in these areas, as opposed to what can I do to be helpful to help in these difficult areas. So we need to change that mindset, change that approach, and get the right people in there to support them. Then I think things will be a lot easier.
You and I have talked several times about the census, and no census has dropped off the list this year, but one of the issues that I bring up consistently is the IRS every single year touches every single person basically across the country, or a vast majority of them on it. Census does it every 10 years, but for whatever reason, Census and IRS won't talk to each other. There is some information sharing behind the scenes, but why couldn't the census every 10 years partner with the IRS, what they do every 1 year, and add a couple of additional questions to your IRS filing, and that also fulfills your census as well for that year, and then for everyone else that doesn't do a filing to be able to then go pursue those folks. Yeah. That seems too common sense to actually work in the federal government, but I've been told for 10 years, won't work. Yeah. I've also asked why won't it work, and no one can give me the answer why it won't.
Yeah. Well, the only limitation I could see offhand why it wouldn't work is the timing of it. The census is where everybody is on one particular day, when they do the measurement, and the IRS filings are a year later. You file 1 year for the previous year.
Right.
So there may be a timing issue there, but I'll look at it. I'll have our team look at it. Yeah, there may be ways to overcome that.
Correct.
But to me, that the timing would be the major
Census
issue.
obviously goes door to door trying to be able to check on people, so it's not, they get as close as they can to one day. That one day could be April 15th.
Right.
That would be just a statutory thing for us to be able to say April 15th is the one date, and so we could work through that process.
But when you'd have to make it. Yeah, I'll think about it. But when you file on April 15th, you're filing for the previous calendar.
But you are filing where you are this year with your address where you are this year on it as well. So let's talk about that at length.
Okay. All right.
To be able to go from there. There's a couple things I actually want to bring up. It's GAO. Can I do that? Do GAO oversight on it. You have been in telework status for 3 years now. You're in the process of coming back in telework status. I look at your numbers typically in the past. You're typically $145 to 1 of recovery. Well done. Spike the football. but now in telework status, you're at about $72 to one. Is that because of telework status, or is that something else?
No, that's something else. I mean, we've been in telework status actually for a decade. I mean, we've had maximum, not maximum, we've had expanded telework. We've studied it. It has had no impact on our quality and productivity of our work. There were two factors that led to the 145. In 1 year, we had an all-time record, about $200 billion of savings.
Good year.
And normally it's more in the 70, billion dollar, kind of 50, $70 billion range. And then secondly, during the pandemic, we had to spend a lot of time looking at the $4.6 trillion in pandemic spending, and so that took us kind of off our normal path. But we're in pretty good shape, and I think we'll continue to produce a great return on
We
investment.
do need to talk about telework, because I'm an advocate for remote work.
Right.
I think that's a possibility, but one of the things I always want to ask is, if you're doing remote work or telework and you're actually somewhere else, but you're getting paid at a higher rate as if you're in Washington, D.C. or San Francisco or somewhere else, there's some real inconsistencies there. But I think there's some real opportunities. I call the time of COVID the world's largest pilot program for telework. And there's some real opportunities I think we can do, especially for spouses of military and others in the days ahead.
Absolutely, and actually, we're in the process of negotiating a remote work option with our union right now. And the issue around pay is the most appropriate thing, and I want to make sure it's equitable, but not out of line.
Yeah, it is an appropriate conversation to be able to have based on where people live and work. GAO, my understanding, has also put out a new style guide for language in it. And I want to just bring this up. We can have a longer conversation on this as well. But the style guide is trying to be more inclusive in the language. I prefer to use the term respectful in language rather than inclusive, and let me give you a reason why. In the style guide, it tells folks at GAO, when using terminology like male and female that's an agency uses or that's written in a law, GAO should state the source to not give the impression that GAO endorses male and female. I'm not sure that's a good idea, because we're back to, if we're going to be not offensive, we need to not be offensive to everybody in it. And there are several other things, taking out terms like man-made or manpower or unmanned, or not using the term policeman, not talking about a person whose gender identity doesn't align with their sex assigned at birth. Implies a much larger, not only political issue, but a societal issue as well, to be able to take some of these things. So there's several things in the style guide that I look at and I say, hey, I really need GAO to stay out of cultural battles, and to definitely not say, if Congress writes a law that says male and female, GAO should basically apologize for it and say, hey, their word, not ours. There's some concerns that are in this. And so love to be able to have a conversation about how we can keep GAO consistent with where we are both in law and not trying to compete with Congress and trying to apologize that Congress inherently uses the word male and female. So this will be a bigger issue. We can talk about it at a different time as well, but we need GAO to stay GAO. Can I just say that?
I understand your point, and be happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I don't mind respectful language. That's a good thing to honor all people in the process, but thank
Right.
you.